welcome on in to another episode of Getting Well with Terry and Friends. I'm Terry, Ian beside me, and we have Alex B. Smith joining us down below. Alex, your first time on the show, welcome. Maybe tell people a little bit about yourself if they haven't seen you before, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and of course, co-host with Ian of the Ice Guys, and Terry, you've been a loyal supporter and a contributor to that program as well. And so, for those of you who have never seen me before, my name's Alex B. Smith. You can follow me at AX Smith Sports on Twitter, and also, like I said, part of the Ice Guys will be rocking and rolling pretty soon with the hockey season. Of course, as we're doing previews, but we'll be doing our show in less than a couple of weeks. Where we got preseason games are starting, I think, in about 8 or 9 days. So everything's gearing up. It's funny how things just quiet down all of a sudden. It's just in with a roar right now with September heading into October. So looking forward to another interesting hockey season for sure. It should be a good one. And we're going to talk about the team that I grew up with, Chicago Blackhawks. And I've been a fan of them basically since I was a little child growing up on the south side of Chicago. They were a horrible franchise to watch when I was younger, and then they made a big turnaround, won 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years throughout the 2010s. They were arguably the dynasty of that decade, and then things just started going downhill from there, and now we're right back at the bottom. So it's a perfect time to kind of talk about what could be one of the worst teams in the NHL this year, my Chicago Blackhawks.
For sure. We'll jump right into it, and we'll start with additions and subtractions. So we'll look at what the Blackhawks have done this offseason. And as you can see, quite a bit, actually. Quite a bit subtractions, quite a bit of additions. I'm going to focus on Wyatt Kalynuk, Dylan Strome, and Dominik Kubalik. 3 players that I did not expect the Blackhawks to just let walk away for free. Those were kind of 3 big surprises in my mind, especially Wyatt Kalynuk has good potential. Maybe the Blackhawks don't see it, but kind of some surprising moves with the subtractions. Other guys like Brett Connolly and Andrew Shaw, Colin Delia, Gustafson aren't going to be huge parts of this team going forward, so it makes sense that guys like that would go. On the additions side, Peter Mrazek will be their starting goaltender for the Hawks, and Alex Stalock will be the backup. That's going to be really interesting duo here.
I can think of other words, but go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. It may not be very good for Hawks fans, but Andreas and Athanasiou, Max Domi, good additions. But I'm not sure that they're going to be able to help the Hawks here ultimately. And then some depth guys and Jack Johnson. Maybe they think that he can be the savior. I'm not sure. But overall, some surprises in the subtractions. I do think they added some talent here in the additions, but nothing really too big for the future. Kind of just for this year or the next couple of years type thing. But we'll go to Ian first. What do you think here, additions and subtractions for the Hawks?
Sure looks like the sign of a team rebuilding, doesn't it? I mean, when you see everything that's happened here with the Blackhawks this year, it's jettisoning out, key players from the last few years. You talked about, I was surprised to see Kubalik gone, Strome not brought back. Definitely all kinds of situations where we said goodbye to a lot of players. Of course, Kirby Dach dealt to the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, it just goes on and on about the players no longer with the Chicago Blackhawks going into this year, and the writing was on the wall right away. This is definitely going to be a team looking at a long-term rebuild, starting over from scratch. Feel kind of bad for Luke Richardson put in a tough spot here as the new head coach of the Blackhawks, but hey, it is what it is. I signed up for it. And now he's going to have to deal with a team that's kind of starting over here in this situation. As far as the additions go, I think it tells you all you need to know that this is a team that's looking long-term, has really no major impetus to compete and be successful this season when you're going into training camp with Peter Mrazek and Alex Stalock as your 2 goaltenders. I mean, that's just something where you're not serious about contending and being competitive when that's going to be the case. I mean, Peter Mrazek, when he's healthy, can still be pretty good. But last year with the Leafs, when he was healthy, He was up, he was down. He had some horrible games last year. Let's not forget that when he was with the Leafs. And then, of course, Alex Stalock. I mean, it's just a guy that's just at the downslope of his career. There's been all kinds of issues with whether teams were trying to get rid of Alex Stalock. And now here's Chicago, trying to bring him on as the backup goaltender. There's a couple signings under the radar, like Jack Johnson brought in, with obviously a big injury situation with Jake McCabe announced earlier today. So all of a sudden they have to bring in Jack Johnson. Max Domi, to me, it's almost like they were a prisoner of the Game 7 moment against Boston in the first round for Carolina. Whoa, Max Domi, look at that Game 7. Mr. Clutch here, Max Domi. Yeah, let's bring him into Chicago, even though the regular season was really mediocre at best. And I'm being kind when it comes to Domi with Carolina last year. Tennessee, a good player. I don't mind that one. And I kind of like, actually, the one that I like the most is Colin Blackwell, a good depth center, good two-way player. He'll do a lot of good things for you, score some goals, win some faceoffs, play penalty kill, power play 5-on-5. He'll help you for sure. But, really most of all, it's definitely a team that's looking at a rebuild with the moves made.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, for sure. I totally forgot about DeBrincat and Kirby Doc, the two trades there, so I made sure to get those in.
DeBrincat, yep.
Two huge pieces gone as well.
Yes.
DeBrincat, Alex will get to it in a second. None too pleased.
For sure. And with the goaltending, like you said, both have big injury questions. So, we may not even see both of these guys may not be the starter and backup for the full season. I would expect injuries. I shouldn't say that. I don't expect injuries, but both are injury prone, so you could have injuries there as well for the goaltending.
Oh, Mrazek the last few years? Oh, you better believe I expect it.
Yeah.
Alex, what do you think about the additions and subtractions for the
Hawks? I mean, like I said, where to start with this? Like you said, it's clearly a rebuild, and like you said, you can look into a lot of these free agents were going to be gone anyway. Calvin DeHaan was, a guy who dealt with some injury issues and was commanding quite a bit of money. They weren't going to keep him around. Andrew Shaw actually ended up retiring. Essentially, he was a free agent, but he had concussion issues. It was pretty much the writing on the wall that he was going to hang it up after his years. Of course, he's won cups with the Hawks previously. Kevin Lankinen, as great of a rookie season as he had, I mean, the guy was in the running for the Calder during that shortened 2021 season. Just didn't really pan out as well, and this just kind of wanted to go in a different direction. Colin Delia, a guy who I thought was going to be really good in the organization a few years back, he looked really good in Rockford. Got a cup of coffee with the Hawks and had a couple of good games. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he was kind of jettisoned into that number 2 role, and then eventually for a brief moment was a starter during the post-COVID season, just did not pan out at all. So disappointing. And he goes off to Vancouver now as actually the backup there, which I thought was kind of interesting, battling for the number 2 spot. But the two trades on draft night, Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Doc. I mean, Kirby Doc, it's a bit unfortunate. I think he did need a change of scenery, to be honest. He looked promising his rookie year. But then when he ended up breaking his wrist playing in the World Junior Tournament, that just kind of seemed where it just kind of derailed his progression. And when he came back from that wrist surgery, they didn't really make him a center that much. They were trying to play him more along the wing where, at first they were trying to develop him. DeBrincat and Doc were essentially, when they were brought in, they were supposed to be the heir apparent to Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, respectively. Doc was going to be that number 1 center, that penalty kill guy. DeBrincat being that dynamic winger that could give you 40, if not 50 goals, and give you 80, 90 points in a given season. To see both of these guys gone at the same time is just really heartbreaking, but especially DeBrincat, because one of the key things in keeping Patrick Kane around, and granted, he's played, 15 plus years, 3 Stanley Cups. The guy's a future Hall of Famer. You think he'd want to ride out into the sunset and maybe go to another team. Like we see that would happen with so many guys throughout the years. They can be a legend. I mean, Ray Bourque, Bruins legend, ended up, ending his career with a couple of years in Colorado to win another Stanley Cup, obviously his first. But you see guys who are franchise players go to other places. So it wouldn't have been shocking to me to ever see Patrick Kane in another uniform. I'm truly being honest. But at the same time, with how successful the franchise had been around him, you think, okay, well, let's do as much as we can to keep him around as long as possible. And then when we truly blow things up, we go in and make a move and get things back in return. Well, DeBrincat was one of the pieces that Kane said, if I stick around, I want DeBrincat by my side. Those two had pretty much been inseparable on the ice the last few years, and you saw most of the key plays you saw from the Hawks season last year, as bad as they were. Every highlight basically was a DeBrincat pass to Patrick Kane goal or a Patrick Kane pass to a DeBrincat goal. And so now to get rid of a piece that's basically going to drive away your franchise player, it just didn't make any sense. They've said both Kane and Taves that they're going to wait out essentially until the trade deadline and just see where things are at that point. But they're willing to stick around for the beginning of the season and see how things roll. You look at the additions they brought in, and of course the goaltending is the big key. Mrazek and Stalock. Peter Mrazek, a guy, like I said, has bounced around with a few teams, cannot stay healthy for a full year. Like I said, you don't wish injuries on anybody, obviously, or even anticipate them. But, at some point, you see guys who just get hurt year after year after year, especially from a betting standpoint. You have to take into consideration that, hey, if they start playing 4, 5, 6 games in a row, maybe something happens and maybe they aren't 100%. And then next thing you know, they're out of the lineup for however long of a time. So you have to take that into consideration. He's a guy that can't stay healthy throughout his career. Alex Stalock, who's a native of South St. Paul, so not too far from me. I've actually known people who are friends with him, people who've gone to high school with him and kept close. He keeps close in the St. Paul area. He loves to go fishing in the offseason. Two things with him. One, he dealt with long COVID, and that was part of the reason why it took him forever to get back. He was with the Oilers organization in the last year, and he had a rough time of it. A couple of games in Edmonton, he looked bad. A couple of games with the Bakersfield in the AHL, he looked bad. He just hasn't really been able to get back to form. And he's a guy who had some injury issues as well earlier in his career. But the other big thing that I know, and this is, like I said, from knowledge of people who know him well, is that back when he was with the Wild, the biggest thing he talked about was he was trying to get to his 700 game mark to basically qualify for NHL pension. And he said that to, pretty much his friends and family that, he's just trying to play as long as he can to collect paychecks. That's something you don't want to hear if you're, a GM of any team in this league. And maybe that's the reason why we've seen him bounce around ever since that statement was kind of left out, leaked out. So now you've got him as your backup goalie. You got Mrazek, who's often injured, as your starter. It's going to be ugly, especially when you look at how bad the defense has been in the last few years of the blue line. You get Jack Johnson in, and now we find out the reason why Jack Johnson was signed is because with Jake McCabe, he had a cervical spine surgery. He's going to be out another 10 to 14 weeks as of now, but this happened a month ago. So, the Hawks are kind of covering things up again. It seems like it's back to the old days, 20, 25 years ago, where, you wonder why a move's being made, and all of a sudden you hear later, oh, well, someone was injured or something else happened, and they're slowly leaking out information and trickling things out the way they want to kind of keep things hidden. So it's just a lot of messy things with the Hawks right now. And, the fact that we're going to see Kane and Taves most likely be done with the Hawks by the end of the season, whether they retire, whether they're traded, who knows what's to happen with that. It just spells doom for this team right now. And it just seems like they're actively tanking to try to get Connor Bedard, try to get that number 1 overall pick next year. But it's going to be rough sledding ahead. And even with Max Domi, and Theosiu, they're going to be some guys that are going to chip in, goals. They're going to be the bulk of the scoring, obviously, as two of the best players on the team. But it's going to be hard to watch. I wish Max's dad was still around playing. Maybe he could, drop the gloves a few times. We could see him play. It'd be something interesting to watch at the United Center this year. But it's going to be pretty rough.
For sure. Vito, welcome on in. What do you think about the Hawks additions and subtractions this offseason?
All right. So thank you for having me here, everyone.
You okay, my friend?
Yeah. I was just working, so I jumped in.
Yeah. You look haggard. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I hope all the background is good. Okay. Well, obviously, they're losing some good players like DeBrincat and Kirby Duck. I mean, those two are very great. And I mean, I don't think Domi or Andres Athanasiou can replace those guys. Well, don't get me wrong. I think Athanasiou and Domi is a great players, but I don't think any one of them is as good as, for example, Alex DeBrincat with the puck and with the finishing touch. So now we only are left with, I guess, Kane and Taves, right? And you're not really sure, but I mean, those guys. I mean, for them, I think they're playing this season I don't why Blackhawks didn't make a trade now. I think they just don't want to rush it, for the Kane and Taves, because you don't really know which teams is going to be very good this year, for example, which is going to be very bad. So I think the trades will happen, but I think they're going to happen like during the season, somewhere like after maybe the New Year's, like closer to the playoffs, when they're going to see which teams exactly needs those scorers, and then they're going to trade them. I think that's how it's going to happen. And the additions is the first. I like Andreas Athanasiou as a player. I think he's very fast, so he can be dangerous. Max Domi is a grinder. We saw what he can do in the playoffs. But again, I think Max Domi is like a playoff player more. So maybe in the season, he's not so valuable as you can have him in the playoffs, because in playoffs, it takes grinding, when we saw how he was scoring in a game 7 with Canes, so that was amazing. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a hard season for Hawks. Peter Mrazek. Well, just Peter Mrazek. Let's see what he does. I mean, I'm not sure. Well,
I know I'm speechless too when they picked him up. That's what I was like, speechless, no speech.
So yeah, you cannot really always, judge too early. I would say in hockey, because it's all about the summer camp, and somebody maybe trains more than the other one. So you don't know what's going on there right now. Maybe Mrazek is going all full in now and wants to become the legend. Who knows? But I think it's too late for him. But anyways, yeah. Well, doesn't look that good. I mean, maybe a little bit more competitive than last year they could try to be, because in the beginning was very bad. We actually didn't expect them to be that bad last season from the start. I mean, Fleury was picked up, so we expected them to be a little bit better team. And after only that they start to lose everyone, then we started to understand that Hawks actually has a very bad roster. So they could have a better season this year, but I mean, in the playoffs, I don't think if they can do much with them. But we're gonna see the lineup at the end of the show, and I think it's gonna be more understandable.
I want to actually follow up with something Alex said about Stalock, okay? Because this is concerning to me. You want guys that are going to come in, they're going to come in good shape, they put in a ton of focus and work in the offseason to be at their best, to help the team in a positive light. And with everything that Alex said about Stalock, I'm worried about that. Like the fact that he's going around telling people, I'm trying to collect my pension, like the seniors do. It's almost like his mind's checked out the door. And then he's thinking, you know what, I'm probably going to retire soon, and I'm just looking to collect my money at this point in time, with no incentive on being the best goalie I can be, no incentive on, maybe working as hard in the off season to be in the best, shape you're in, to be at the highest level in terms of stopping pucks that you need to be this season. That's all concerning. Let's say I'm 74 years old and I'm still in the handicapping business, God willing. Let's say that's the case. And I'm at the point now where I'm ready to walk out the door. I'm done. I'm ready to retire, but I'm still collecting subscriber fees from clients of mine, and they're still paying me to do the work, research, handicap all the games, pick winners, help them profit. But what if I'm in a situation where I'm out the door, I'm not putting in the time and effort, and I'm collecting all those subscription fees, but I'm not capping the games. I'm not looking up injuries. I'm not looking at ATS trends, or I'm not looking at matchups, or I'm not watching as much sports in that time, but I'm collecting subscription fees from these people, and they're expecting me to perform, and I'm not interested in performing. That's kind of what I'm worried about here with Stalock a little bit. This is a guy that's had a long career already. He's had a bunch of injuries. He's going into a situation now where he's going to a team that's probably going to have a miserable season. Where's the motivation? Where's the incentive to work hard, be ready, to be at your best, to perform at your best as an NHL caliber goaltender? Where is that when we're starting to hear these little rumblings that Alex mentioned, that he's just interested in getting his pension fund from the National Hockey League long term? So that's the problem. I want guys that are dialed in, even though this is a team that's tearing it down. If you're putting a product out on the ice, you still want players that are going to be putting themselves in the spot where they're ready to compete and play at their best. I'm worried about that with a guy like Stalock in that situation that Alex referenced.
Yeah, and just to clarify too, I made an error. I said the 700 games. That's actually how Major League Baseball works. It's 10 years that you need in the NHL to collect your pension. He technically is at that point now because he played one game for San Jose last season, but now he will go into his 11th season, and if he's with the team for at least half a year, that's all the clearance he needs to be eligible for his pension. So I wouldn't be shocked if this is his last year, whether he has a good one or not.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe it would be better for the Hawks to look at one of their young goalies, which is a good segue into top prospects and upcoming free agents. Looking at the prospects, Lucas Reichel is probably one of their top prospects. Recent draft picks: Kevin Korchinski, Frank Nazar, and then two goalies: Arvid Soderblom and Drew Comesso are the top prospects from rankings that I've seen. I'm not really hugely familiar with the Hawks prospects. I'll be honest about that. But Lucas Reichel definitely does have some potential. One of their star players going forward in the future, at the current moment at least. The goalies are always question marks, but it's never a bad idea, especially a rebuilding team, to stock up on young goalies and see how they develop. So for me, based on everything that we've heard about Stalock, maybe it would be good to give one of these younger guys a go sometime during the season. Upcoming free agents, top two, obviously Taves and Kane. Both of their contracts are at the final year of their deals. So we'll see if they remain in Chicago for the rest of the season. What happens after that? Would be shocked if either re-signed with the Blackhawks. I maybe they make some huge run to the playoffs somehow they would resign, but I don't really see that happening. I think both are probably on their way out. Anthony Ciu and Domi both only on 1 year deals. So if those experiments don't work out, the Hawks can move on. The big names there, Kurashev and Caleb Jones. I really would think that you'd want to keep Kurashev around, but from what I've seen from the Hawks and their young players, it's not a given that they re-sign Kurashev or Jones. But I would be keeping Kurashev around if I was the Hawks GM. Jack Johnson, Stalock, Kariya, not really pieces that I would be keeping around for a rebuild, but the main free agent there that I would be looking at for the Hawks would be Kurashev, in my opinion. We'll go to Alex next. What do you think here at the prospects and free agents upcoming for the Hawks?
Yeah, so there's a couple of bright names on this list. Lucas Reichel, I mean, he's going to get a chance to possibly be playing with Kane and Taves on opening night in Colorado. This guy's been electric with Team Germany, and we've seen him kind of dominate throughout his younger career. So he's going to get a real solid look at being a top 6 forward with this team and possibly being a piece of the future. So that's definitely, I think, the brightest spot. Well, I'll say the brightest spot for this season. I think the brightest spot for the franchise moving forward, the organization, is Drew Comesso. He's been lights out at Boston College. I think he needs some more time to develop. I'd like to see him get a full season under his belt in Rockford before they even think about trying to bring him up. The Hawks have been really kind of. It's funny. Go back to Corey Crawford, a decade ago. Corey Crawford spent a lot of time with first Norfolk, and then when they moved to the AHL team to Rockford. And it just seemed like, is he really going to ever get a chance? They were, spending money on free agents. They had Niemi, they had Huey, they brought Hobby Bullen back and forth. And but once he was fully ready and developed, he was a monster and arguably the best goalie in Blackhawks history. So I hope they take time with Comesso the way they did with Crawford, let him develop and become a true professional, maybe even get 2 years under his belt in Rockford. He said, this is a rebuild for the long haul. Don't rush it with him. I think he's going to be your top guy come 2025, 2026, and beyond. So that's something I'm hoping that they're kind of delay with. Arvid Soderblom, I mean, I wouldn't call him a top prospect at all. The few games we saw with him last year were pretty much disastrous. He seems like he'll be a guy who could be a fringe AHL goalie at best. Like I said, if Mrazek or Stalock goes down, he's going to have to come up, and it's probably just going to be even rougher than what we're seeing from the number 1 and number 2 goalies potentially moving forward. As far as free agents go, like I said, Kane and Taves, it would take some kind of bizarre miracle for either one of them to re-sign. Ciu and Domi, honestly, like I said, being on 1 year deals, these are two guys, they're 27 and 28 years old. If they can have big years, maybe they can play their way to getting a big contract. There's going to be $44 million of open cap money for the Hawks next year as of right now, assuming they let everybody go. So, one of these guys has a breakout season, and they could be looking at getting a big contract. potentially Kurashev, as you mentioned, definitely a guy who I think could stick around. Same thing with Caleb Jones, obviously with his brother having that long-term deal. It seems like Jones will probably be a guy that would stick around, play with his brother for a few years. We already talked about Stalock. Jack Johnson is a guy who's just kind of being, plugged in for this year. Maybe he retires after this year. He's, getting up in age. Juju Kara, a great player, somebody who I was really excited about last year, but had another bad concussion that kind of took him out for most of the season. So I think that's his fourth concussion of his professional career. Worry about that. So, he may not be a guy. If he can even right now, I think he still would be on IR. They have to clear him by training camp. If he can stay healthy for a whole year, maybe he can play his way to getting another deal for 1 or 2 years. If not, you never know how long his career might last, depending on wherever he is. So as far as those free agents go, I don't think we're going to see most of any of these guys coming back after this season. They're going to just try to rebuild from scratch. And like I said, with Kane and Taves, they're more likely going to move them at the deadline, try to get as many pieces as possible, mostly draft picks. But depending on who they deal with, they might be able to get somebody who's under the radar that could be, they could plug in next year at the NHL lineup, not just exactly going for prospects and draft picks all the way through.
For sure. I've heard a lot of rumors about the Rangers and Kane. I would be interested to see if New Jersey might take a swing at him because they've got a lot of prospects and young players that I'm sure the Hawks would want.
Buffalo has a ton of room, and of course that's where Patrick Kane's hometown. That was the team he watched growing up. So if they make a run, they're live for it. Jonathan Taves, I think, is a little different because Taves, he's had concussion issues and injury issues as well, health concerns over the last couple of years. He might not go somewhere where he's going to be, used in a high impact role. Patrick Kane, wherever he goes in this league, he's still one of the best players in the league. He'll be a top line forward, top power play option. Taves, if he gets dealt to a contender, he's going to be more of that, relied on that leadership role in the locker room, penalty killing guy, kind of more of doing the grunt work, the grinder work, something that he's done with the Hawks for the last few years. Taves has never been the big point guy. He's always been the leader in the locker room. And he's always been the guy to kind of really do the dirty work of the superstars, from this last decade plus. So that's something that might, as far as making a deal, you're not going to get a lot back with just Taves as you will from Kane. Kane, you'll get back at least 5 or 6 players for sure. Taves, maybe 2 or 3. Maybe like I said, a few more draft picks or things of that nature. But they're going to go in different places for sure. Which I'm sure will be interesting for both of them because these are two guys, other than Taves' rookie year, they've never played without each other. They've been on different lines at times, of course, but, it'd just be interesting to see how these two respond away from 1901 West Madison at some point in their careers.
For sure.
It reminds me a little bit like Joe Thornton, like these fourth line players, which are actually good. Yeah, like Milan Lucic as well, he used to be a first 2-line player, then he kind of drops on the 4th line and so on.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Depending on where he goes, if he goes, let's say, I mean, I don't really know what teams would really need Jonathan Taves right now because, like I said,
maybe something like I don't know, with Corey Perry together in Tampa.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, Tampa would have to kind of swing a lot to even try to get part of his contract. That would require the Hawks to eat all of his contract, which is something they're not really trying to do if they're going to make a move this year. But like you said, if he were to go to a top level contender where things are already set, let's say at Pittsburgh, for example, because Pittsburgh's a team that's got 3 aging centers and they've all had injury issues, and maybe one of them goes down by March or April. And you might see him play a 3rd-line role, something we've never really seen from him before. He's always been a top 6 forward, but he might be asked to play that role, and I'm sure he could definitely do it. Like I said, he's a guy who can get physical at times and throw the body around, even drop the gloves here and there. So that's something we'd have to see from him, if he gets moved somewhere else. Like I said, Kane, he's going to be your ace in the hole, basically. And if he goes to a team where they're already stacked with guys, then you just throw him right in the mix, and the strong get stronger.
For sure. Vito, what do you think about upcoming free agents and the prospects for the Hawks?
Well, nothing much. I think pretty much Alex knows well about his team, so he's telling all the facts, so you cannot really tell anything more. Well, yeah, but I already thought about the Taves and Kane. I think that they're going to be traded during the season, so the Hawks, I think, and the agent of those. I think the Taves and Kane actually has the same agent, if I'm not mistaken. I think they both have the same agent. So, yeah, he's going to just wait and see which clubs will need these players, the best to adjust their lineup. So definitely they will be traded. I think just it's a matter of time, And yeah, I can agree only with Alex. I mean, Patrick Kane, he's a goal scoring machine. I mean, we saw last year with a team which was, he only had Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Duck, and he's making anyone good. It's like playing. It used to be like to play with Sidney Crosby. Anyone who plays with Crosby is good. So same is happening with Kane. I mean, you can put anyone on that left wing, and that guy becomes a superstar like Panarin, like DeBrincat. Those guys were not so good before they started to play with Kane, and I think he also teaches them the game right, and so on. So yeah, that will be a huge loss, but I think they need to start to rebuild, because they already made the cup runs. I mean, they have won the Stanley Cup. It's all what you actually ask from the team, when you have good players as Kane, as Taves. I mean, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, it's already the game over. I mean, you already reached the top level right? So I remember how Kane scored against, I think, Flyers, that the winning goal from the corner. So so those players will be missed. I think just our atmosphere in the locker room will be missed a lot more, just not like on the ice. But yeah, well, it's Athanasius and Domi. I like to see those players on a 1-year contract, because then they need to perform. When you sign someone for 3-4 years, then the guy don't play anymore. It's always those seasons when you have last year, then you play the best. So I like those signings. I think they can do good. They can have a breakout year. Definitely, Athanasiou can skate very fast. I know, so just need some finishing from him. The rest of the guys cannot really advise too much. Well, Kariya, I remember he got a serious injury last year. That was very serious, but I'm glad that he's healthy and everything is good. And let's see how he's gonna compete this year. And that's it. Yeah, Arvid Soderblom, I don't think he is that good. So yeah, he had a couple games, but not sure he's got that good. And that's all.
All right. I was just thinking while you guys were talking, imagine Patrick Kane in Edmonton. I don't think he would go to Edmonton, but imagine Kane with McDavid. That would be scary.
Yeah, you know what? And then if they go on and win a Stanley Cup, is it McDavid or is it Kane?
Yep.
There you go.
I've been making that argument for years, so something to think about.
Ian, what do you think about the Hawks prospects and upcoming free agents?
What's surprising about Chicago is you would think all of these years, being a playoff team, winning Stanley Cups, being, one of the better teams in the NHL, their prospect pool would be very depleted right now. It's actually not that bad. They're actually a middle of the pack team in terms of their prospect rankings. If you look at the consensus prospect rankings across the NHL right now, Blackhawks are middle of the pack. I mean, they're obviously not a top 5 or top 10, but they're not at the bottom either. And when you look at the list, we have to start with Lukas Reichel, because this is a player that's going to be a top 6 forward, I think, this year for the Blackhawks. He's going to have his first full season in the NHL. He's certainly played well internationally. And how about down in the AHL with Rockford last year? He was a point-per-game player down there. 57 points, 56 games for Lukas Reichel last year in Rockford. So showed you an ability to finish offensively. Great upside there. Talent, skill level, very high. And now it's going to be a question of, is it ready now, right away, to be in a top 6, potentially even a top line role for the Chicago Blackhawks this season right away. Of course, with Doc and DeBrincat traded, the good thing is they got draft capital, first-round picks for this past year's draft, and they used them. Kevin Korchinski, I think, is someone that they're going to be able to think of as a steady, solid, contributing blue liner for them. Really does a lot of good things, sees the ice well, skates well. For a defenseman, which is so important these days. You don't want the defenseman like the Hal Gill from back in the days where you're stuck in mud, you can't move. You got to be able to nicely, swiftly skate the puck out of your own zone. You can do that. He's got a little physical element to him. Frank Nazar, they really like, that's not how you pronounce it, by the way. Frank Nazar is definitely someone that they're very interested in. He's a hound on the puck. That's what you like to see, that relentless work ethic, like a Zach Hyman type. I mean, those are the kind of players you win with. And Frank Nazar's got that. And of course, U.S. development program continues to get better and better and better, with what they're doing with their junior hockey talent. Year in and year out, it's getting better in the United States. And Nazar, a big part of that. Arvid Soderblom, we saw him in with the Blackhawks last year. It was rough, let's be honest. And I think when you look at it long term, Drew Comesso is definitely the more long term goalie. But there's other prospects too that they're very high on. They like Alex Vlasic. They like Isaac Phillips, defensive-minded, stay-at-home defensemen that they think are going to be solid, be good in their own end, kind of that type that we saw last year with Tampa Bay, and he's moved on now, of course, from last year's Lightning team. But those type of block shots, they're steady in their own zone. And I think you're going to get that from some of those Chicago prospects. So no, it's a decent prospect pool. Like I said, it's not a top 5 or 10, but they're not like Philly, they're not like Pittsburgh, they're not like Washington, where they've completely, just destroyed their prospect pool because they've been trading away draft picks, trading away prospects for many years in a row, and they've got nothing left. At least Chicago's got a decent little haul of prospects still in their cupboard. Moving forward, and they're only going to get stronger with their prospect pool now because they're going to be all about accumulating draft picks and prospects moving forward. Alex really hit on it. Kurashev's probably the biggest free agent that they're going to need to tend to in the offseason. Everybody else is, someone you can do away with. Jack Johnson's going to be one and done. Stalock going to be one and done. I don't even think Max Domi may be here beyond this year for the Blackhawks as well. So a lot of question marks. Taves and Kane, it's probably a question of when, not if, they get moved at some point. So it's really more than anything Kurashev's that one name you see on that upcoming free agents list that I think there's an onus on Chicago. Yeah, let's get it done.
For sure. I totally agree. Next, we'll look up at the possible lineup. Obviously, the Jake McCabe news just came out today. So I had him here in the defense, so I had to update that. We'll bring it up here. So looking at the possible lineup for the Hawks this year, and this is what I came up with. Top 6, Taves, Kane, Athanasiou. Maybe Alex is saying Reichel might get that top spot. Maybe not, if not on the second line with Domi, Tyler Johnson. And then after that, big question marks at the bottom 6. I don't really think they're going to get a whole lot of offense from the bottom 6. So hopefully a lot of these guys can provide some good defensive play. But don't really expect a lot of offense from the bottom 6. Looking at the defense, I put the Jones brothers together. I don't think it's likely that they play together. I don't think Caleb Jones will be on the top line. But really, the Hawks have so many options with their defense here that they could mix and match. I have Alex Vlasic up here, Nicholas Bowden, possibility. Ian Mitchell, I think, would probably make this team, especially with the McCabe news. Jack Johnson will obviously be there. And then have the current goaltending, Mrazek, Stalock, Soderblom, and then Jackson Stauber is another goalie in the AHL. Based on what we've seen from Soderblom, it's not a lock that he would be the third. Maybe Jackson Stauber is given a look. Who knows? But kind of a rough lineup here, especially if you do take out Taves and Kane, especially Kane. That'll be a lot of offense. But if you're going for Connor Bedard, Patrick Kane is not going to help you in that. If that's your goal, having him in the lineup isn't going to help you with that. So we'll see what the Hawks do. We'll go to Vito first. What do you think about the possible lineup here for the Hawks?
Well, I mean, looks, the top 6 looks decent. I think maybe Lucas, the rookie, perhaps he will maybe get a chance to play with Kane. I think just to give him that, Kane is good with those new guys, so I think he could get a chance. Actually, he's a righty or a lefty, Reichel?
I see that he plays.
He'll be left. He'll be left.
Yeah,
he's a lefty. Okay, but still he can play. It doesn't matter a lot. Well, Athanasiou. Well, Tyler Johnson is a righty, I know, so they might be switched up with the Athanasiou. But yeah, this one looks better, I think. And we see what Hawks come up with. Sometimes Taves and Kane also plays on different lines, I think. Not always they play in the same line. So I can see Domi, Reichel, Kane maybe playing together, and then Taves, Athanasiou, Johnson, something like that. But top six is decent. The question is about, I think, the depth, like in the third and the fourth line. It's going to be a big competition there, I think, and new young players there. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of those last names, so I think it's going to be a big battle. Sometimes it's good, a good competition in the team. I think it's a very good thing, especially for the third, fourth line. So you have those guys trying. So that's good one. And regarding the defense, well, obviously Seth Jones is the main guy, I think, on the team for sure, and the rest of them are kind of balanced. I would say mid, maybe less than mid. I don't know, but Seth Jones is the Vlasic is also decent, I think. Or that's not that Vlasic. I'm missing something, I guess. Vlasic
Yeah,
plays.
don't mix him up with Mark Edward. This is Alex.
Exactly.
The young prospect. Yeah.
So yeah, this Vlasic I don't know so much, but Seth Jones is definitely a good one. And well, regarding the goalies, a little bit problem there, I think. I don't know. Well, but we saw Fleury also could not help them last year. So I guess Hawks just understood that there should not be a superstar goalie, not a superstar goalie can help them. So let's see what Mrazek can do. I mean, Staylock, we already had that conversation, so I guess we don't need to repeat it. But yeah, well, let's see. I think, isn't this Mrazek's first time he's a first starter? Is he been, or he's been
starter before, but he's been
as a true number one. I think this might be the first time in a long time that he's been just like, this is your show and you run with it kind of thing.
Yeah. So maybe, who knows? If sometimes goalies need that confidence, that the coach trusts them and general manager trusts them. So I'm not saying that he's going to be Vasilevsky or Shishchorkin, but I mean, he could have a better season than he has had last years, just the time will show, I would say.
All right. Ian, what do you think about the possible lineup here for the Hawks?
So the strength of the team is definitely offensively. I mean, at least defensively is going to be rough, in my opinion. But at least there's some Taves and Kane obviously are going to be starting the season there, so you're going to get offense from them. Lucas Reichel, like I said, a point per game player in the AHL, and Patrick Kane. He could have a dust mop playing next to him, and that dust mop will get 40 goals. Or have a big season offensively. So Reichel's going to be fine, especially if he plays with Kane on the top line. There's no question about that. Max Domi, Tyler Johnson, Athanasiou, they're all pretty good offensive play. Like that top six is going to put some pucks in the net. Now, Domi has to have a better regular season. Simple as that, because last year the regular season wasn't good enough from him. He needs to step up his game here. I think he realizes that he should. You don't have Niederreiter and you don't have Svechnikov, you don't have Aho. You don't have all of this incredible forward talent around you to take the load off and the pressure off. You're counted upon now here in Chicago to be a big part of this offense. So I think for Max Domi, he's got to step up his game in the regular season. There is going to be some trouble with the third and the fourth line. Who's going to step up in terms of offense for them? Because there's issues. I mean, Sam Lafferty gave you 5 goals in 58 games last year. That's not much. Kurashev's got to get better. Let's see what we get out of Taylor Radish. I think he can take his game to another level. He only had 11 goals, 11 assists, 22 points in 74 games split with Tampa and Chicago last year. You need more from him. I like Colin Blackwell. I'll be honest. I like the way he has played the last 2 years. The Rangers 2 years ago split with the Kraken and then the Leafs last year. And his offensive game has improved each of the last 2 seasons coming into this stint here with the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, so I think you're going to be able to get something out of him at least, some offensive upside. And like I said, it's not just with the offense with him, it's other things that he can do for you. But, you're talking about 20 points, 58 games last year, 22 points in 47 games the year before that. That's not bad. That's not bad for a third, fourth line player in terms of offensive numbers. So I like that if I'm Chicago. I'll maybe get something out of Blackwell. Here in this season offensively. As far as the blue line, though, I mean, you need more from Seth Jones. It was kind of a tough year there. Jack Johnson, still can play, I think, a little bit. But you see, and even with Colorado last year, a few of the goals that went in on Colorado, Jack Johnson's on the ice. So, which tells you where he's at this stage of his career. Vlasic could be good, but again, he's going to be cutting his teeth in the NHL for the first time. If he gets into the top 6 forward group, Connor Murphy's still got IR issues. If he's going to be ready for the start of the season, we don't know. And then, of course, you've got the injury just now to Jake McCabe, which is unfortunate because this is the one guy guaranteed on this Chicago blue line on paper coming into the season. He'll put someone on their keister. He'll clear the front of the net. He'll be very good defensively, responsible in his own end. And now you're not going to have that on the ice for a long period of time. So that sucks, certainly for Chicago. And that's why they're going to be hurting, I think, defensively. And they're going to be hurting defensively because I don't know if they've got a goalie that can stop pucks consistently. Mrazek is always injured. Last year when he was healthy, he had a great game. He had a horrible game. He had a great game. He had a horrible game. Just ask Sheldon Keefe what kind of goalie Mrazek was for him last year. Just way too bloody inconsistent. And then when he get hurt, and that's what you worry about. And Alex Stalock, I'm not banking on him to get me a ton of great performances in net. So, an over team, definitely it feels like that with Chicago in terms of their totals with their games this season. Probably going to be some high-scoring hockey in the Windy City and some sloppy play on a lot of nights.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be looking opposing teams, team total, and full game over, so especially at the beginning of the year. Hopefully books don't catch on too quick, but it might already be priced when the season starts pretty high.
And player props, jump on Lucas Reichel props right away because that's going to be the time to bet them is the first 2 weeks of the season, first month. Because if he's playing with Kane, you're going to get those bargains. You might even get plus 250, plus 300 goal score props. And then if he's lighting it up first month of the year playing with Patrick Kane, which is entirely possible because everybody looks good playing with Patrick Kane, then all of a sudden he's only going to be plus 150 to score a goal on a nightly basis. And his points props are going to go up. So if Reichel's as good as we think he could be, jump on that right away. Don't wait.
For sure. Alex, what do you think about this possible lineup for the Hawks?
Well, you're talking about, whether the books are going to catch on or not. We already have the lines for their game one, which would be the opener at Colorado, which is where they opened last year. They're plus 320 to plus 350, and we're already seeing 6.5. So we're not going to be able to get much value out of anything as far as right out of the gate. But like you said, there's going to be some things. There's some bright spots. There's some bright spots with all 32 teams, at least as far as the first game goes. Lucas Reichel, like I said, being with Patrick Kane, I think that's going to do him a wealth of wonders as long as those two are together. And really, the kind of the dark joke of all of this is that the power play might actually be somewhat decent if you've got Reichel, Taves, Kane, Johnson, and Jones as your five. Yes, your PP1. That's not too bad, honestly. The thing is, are they going to be able to, get on the power play that often? And, Luke Richardson being the new coach, can he finally crack the code that has been, unsolvable for the last 12, 13 years of the Hawks having a decent power play throughout an entire season? We've seen flashes of brilliance at times, but they often struggle with the man advantage, even having a guy like Patrick Kane and guys like John Taves. So that's something to keep an eye on. The bottom six is something straight out of the 2001, 2002 lineup, basically. I mean, these guys, hopefully Joe Quenneville's blender is still somewhere in that building because they're going to be mixing lines up and down every single game, it seems like. So it's going to be, kind of rough and patchwork that they're going to, put things together, see who does what. Reese Johnson's kind of one of those more physical guys. You see him drop the gloves every now and then. Ian mentioned about Colin Blackwell. He's a guy who can chip in offensively and do some work. Taylor Radish had some shots of brilliance as well. We talked about Kershaw also. So there's some guys who could maybe have, a good game or two, but consistency is going to be rough with that bottom six. The defense, we've talked about the injuries bug biting them. Connor Murphy, he can hardly stay healthy for a full year. McCabe, he's a good defenseman, a good stay-at-home guy, but the surgery that he's coming off of, two cervical spine issues, and then he already had an ACL injury, a couple of years ago in Buffalo. So you wonder, his durability. The Jones brothers and Johnson are going to be your three key defensemen there. Vlasic and Mitchell, and Ian touched on it with the depth and the prospect pool of the Hawks. It's really because they've had to get a lot of work in on the blue line. A lot of those blue liners, if you look at the what would be a projected top six for Rockford, 5 of those guys have decent NHL experience from the last couple of years. So that's really why the prospect pool looks good, is because they've been kind of had to be thrown in the fire because of these injuries on the blue line. So they can kind of mix and match the bottom 4 on that blue line and maybe get some decent development moving forward. But they're not going to be able to stop a whole lot. And as far as goaltending goes, like I said, we talked about Mrazek. the thing is, this, like I said, this is his first time in a long time where he's the number one. He's not in a 1A, 1B situation. And he's finally healthy. And that's a key. That's something we didn't mention with Patrick Kane either. Keep in mind, Patrick Kane, with the numbers he's had the last 2 years, he was dealing with injuries, and kind of just quietly went about that. So now he's fully healthy, and Mrazek being fully healthy, maybe that could spark something. Mrazek, the quotes that I've heard from him is that he's excited to get this chance to play with an original six franchise and be kind of in the spotlight, be the number one guy. If he can take the reins and stay healthy, that would be it'd be a shock to see him play a full season. But if he can and do well, then sky's the limit for him in that spot. Stalock, for all that we've said about his situation, we have seen him turn in his career some spots of brilliance as a backup. And we talk about the 1A, 1B system all the time and how that's become more prevalent amongst goaltenders. But Stalock is kind of a throwback in that sense of he can be a true number two guy, not play for a week and a half, and you plug him in, and then he can give you a good, 35, 40 save performance, and only allow maybe a goal or two. We saw that from him when he was fully healthy. Now, that's the caveat. Is he fully healthy? And, of course, is his mind just completely focused on hockey? But if those two things are true, then maybe the plug-and-play system could work a little bit. But like I said, that still relies on the blue line in front of you. They can't be a team like they were with Fleury, getting 40, 50 shots in front of them and then, hanging on for 2-1 games, end up losing in shootouts and losing in overtime. That's not going to work here. This blue line doesn't hold up. Mrazek and Stalock, even at their best, they're going to give up 4 or 5 goals a night. So you're looking at overs galore, and you've got an offense, at least the top 6 on that offense, that can kind of keep pace, chip in a few goals of their own. Soderblom, like I mentioned, this is a good chance he may not be the number 3. Jackson Stauber is an interesting wild card. He's with the college free agent signing out of Providence. He was okay in Providence. He is the son of Rob Stauber, and if you don't know about Rob Stauber, he was the first goalie to ever win the Hobie Baker Award back in the 80s here at the University of Minnesota. He had a very interesting style. Just think about Dominic Hasek, but not nearly as good. He liked to come out of the crease a lot and play a very kind of weird hybrid style. You won't see that from Jackson, thankfully. He's more of a traditional stay-at-home goaltender, but he's definitely a guy who could get some looks, probably going to get some more time in Rockford. Like I said, the way that they're trying to develop things, and of course, like I said, Comesso is going to be the kind of star in waiting there. So we're not going to see much movement with that top 4 as far as goaltending goes, unless injuries prevail. So that's pretty much what you're going to get from your goaltending there. And like I said, seeing that IR list is unfortunate because Murphy, Carr, and McCabe, they're all talented players when they're healthy, but they've just had issues throughout their careers where they just cannot stay off of that injured list. So it's been unfortunate for those 3 guys.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll look at the last part of the show, which is looking at the last 5 years for the Hawks and looking at the futures. It's really interesting because their futures are exactly the same as the Coyotes. The show will be in about an hour from now. Same point total, same odds to make the playoffs, same division, same cup. And they've even made the playoffs the same year, 2019, 2020, and missed the playoffs the other 4 years. So very similar previous 5 years for the Blackhawks and the Coyotes. Blackhawks total 65.5, 68 points last year. But 28, 42, and 12 is not a very good record. So do they improve on that? Do they get much worse? I'm not quite sure. If I had to make a bet, I would be going with the under 65.5. This isn't going to be a team I'm going to be looking at with the point total. Obviously, to win the division, plus 500,000 and plus 500,000. Oh, that math's not correct. Plus 50,000 and then plus 100,000 to make the Stanley Cup, or to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, you posted the true odds there. For those that would be 500,000 to win the division and $1 million to win the cup for sure.
Yeah, so to make the playoffs, plus 2,500. To miss the playoffs, minus 6,000. The Hawks are a hard team when it comes to futures. Basically, you're looking at the point total, and if you think they go up or down, and I would have to lean with the under, but not running to the window to bet it either. we'll go to Alex first. What do you think about the last 5 years and the futures for the Hawks?
Well, like I said, I mean, we thankfully with the magic of the internet and so forth, we have a lot of great old footage to watch from the early 2010s to remember the good years. It's been rough, and it's only going to get worse for the next couple of years. Obviously, you had the bubble playoff where they like I said, first round exit, but they actually knocked out the Edmonton Oilers at home, mind you, in that bubble run. So that was probably the last playoff games we will see of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves as in Hawks uniforms for sure. And things are only going to get worse. There's no value in anything as far as futures goes. And you mentioned they're on the same plane as the Arizona Coyotes. And the irony of that is, and like I said, me being a Hawks fan, and I've seen this time and time again, they need to be the worst team in the league. Well, there's a possibility they may not be because Arizona's got a whole different situation. They're going into a new 5,000 seat, shoebox of an arena. They're going to be on the road for the first few games of the year. And the Hawks, as bad as they were to start the season last year, keep in mind that was mostly due to Jeremy Colleton being the head coach. They get rid of Jeremy Colleton and bring in Derek King maybe at the beginning of training camp. They probably don't have as bad of a start, and maybe they don't even have as bad of a finish. Maybe they could be a little bit more competitive and probably finish maybe in the 75 to 80 point range. But things
and maybe not blowing the thing to bits either.
And maybe not blowing the thing to bits either, right? Exactly. In that point. So the way they started kind of dictated how they fell at the end of the year. And I mentioned Derek King. The transition there is that he's not gone. He's just not the head coach anymore. He's the assistant coach under Luke Richardson, which now begs the question, okay, well, if Richardson starts off and he's not doing well, is there going to be some rift and turmoil there? I mean, how does Derek King feel? All right, I was coaching this team. We didn't do much. You let me go. You bring in somebody else, but now this guy brings me on as an assistant. If he's not doing well, then, he's got to be looking around and saying, well, why didn't I just keep my job as head coach? What's going to change here? So Luke Richardson's got a lot of pressure on him. Obviously, one, just taking over a team that, had been the pillar of excellence for a long time and now trying to be the head of a rebuild. And then the fact that you've really got the guy that, you're replacing over your shoulder, that makes for an awkward work environment in any line of work, honestly. So that's something to keep an eye on. That'd be a storyline to definitely follow for sure. But the Hawks, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, listen, they're basically giving away preseason tickets. All tickets for preseason games are $20. It's first come, first serve. They've never done that in history. So that just tells you that they're preparing for the absolute worst. I'm preparing for the absolute worst as a fan. I don't want them to be a team that gets 70 points and ends up being 8th overall. I want them to be the worst team in hockey so they can get Connor Bedard, and let's get this rebuild started now. There's no reason to prolong the inevitable. Let's go on and make the moves we need to do. And so that, in 3 or 4 years, we're not talking about the worst team in hockey. We're talking about a team that can contend for the postseason and beyond.
Yeah, definitely would be the smart. I think they waited a little bit already too long. Like they were, should we rebuild? Shouldn't we rebuild?
Yeah.
And I think that's
I think that bubble run honestly kind of inflated things a little bit too, which I don't know if they really thought they had a chance to make a run in that to the cup in that, which I mean, you shouldn't count anything out. Honestly, we saw what craziness happened that year and then the year after. But at the same time, it's just you just knew other things were going on, and obviously, if you start delving deeper into the organization, that's a whole mess we don't even need to bring up. But just all of that as a collective, it just, like I said, the rebuild should have started earlier, and they kept prolonging the inevitable. And we got our hopes up. Like I said, just 1 year ago, we're talking about the Hawks opening in Colorado with Marc-Andre Fleury and all this energy and seemingly like, oh, can they be a team to make a run and disrupt some things? Maybe they're a wild card contender with a Hall of Fame goalie and Kane and a healthy Taves, and we just didn't see that happen. And so now they're kind of in that same limbo of we still got these pieces, but we got to move them and do something. And like I said, they're just prolonging things, and we got to rip the Band-Aid off at some point. So do it sooner than later.
For sure. Ian, what do you think about the futures for the Hawks and the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's like that line from Seinfeld. It's like a Band-Aid. You just all in one motion, right off. Yeah, that's what you got to do. That's what they should have done here with Chicago. And so people are saying friggin' dark horse Stanley Cup contender last year before it started. And look how it ended up turning out. Now, a year later, we're tearing the thing down and we're starting over from scratch pretty much. So yeah, it's under or pass for me in terms of the point total. Certainly, I lean that way. It's a low number, but you saw teams get into the 50s last year, or just finish in the 50s with the win total. So it's not totally out of the realm of possibility for Chicago that they could finish low 60s or in the 50s with their point total. So it's definitely under or pass. Don't know if I'll bet it. Some other win totals I like, or point totals I like better, but certainly would only lean to the under. As far as profitability goes, last year, Chicago wasn't, believe it or not, dead last in terms of profitability. As I mentioned yesterday, it was the Philadelphia Flyers that were dead last in the NHL in terms of profitability last year. But Chicago was next in line, second last in terms of profitability last year. Obviously, look, it could improve. You actually could see the number. You could see their ranking in terms of profitability on the year go up, because they're going to be priced in that. Look at already on opening night, they're over plus 300 underdog. There's going to be nights where they steal one, they surprise. They do what Arizona did against Colorado late last year, win when they were like a plus 400, plus 450 underdog. And just all of a sudden in one night, you're plus 4.5 units, betting on the Chicago Blackhawks. So that's why I think, and there's going to be some spots to take them, but you got to be very careful. You got to be very methodical and mercurial with when you decide to back the Blackhawks. Good spots. Maybe a team's decimated with injury, the opponent. Maybe they're in a travel situation. They've got a big game coming up against a better team, and that's the time maybe Chicago, especially pre-trade deadline Chicago, when Taves and Kane are still there, that's when they could really surprise and maybe pull some upsets. So they probably will make more. It won't be as bad. I shouldn't say they'll make money for sure. They could still be a losing team, minus units on the year. They won't be that bad, I think, like last year, because they're just going to be priced in a completely different price range compared to what we saw last season.
And wait, just to tail quickly on what Ian said in reference to profitability with this team. One thing people have to realize, and I've done this, I've done my power rankings already. You have to rank the home ice advantage for the Hawks at a fat 0 right now. Here's why. One, like I said, you're going to have a half-empty building pretty much right after, no later than after opening night. Give or take a few games. If they do any ceremonies, that's the only time you're going to see that place even close to 22,000 again. Secondly, we always talk about some of the situational spots, 6 o'clock Sunday night home games. They never show up for those, even when they were the best team in the league. Those are going to be really rough. The time to bet on the Hawks at any given point this year will most likely be on the road, because at home, when they start playing bad, they're going to hear it from the few thousands that are in that building. It's going to be rough. When they get away from home, we saw this happen with Arizona. We saw this happen with Buffalo over the years. Sometimes getting away from home and clearing your head and say, you know what, it's everyone against us mentality. That's when you start seeing those big dogs cashing in those big prices. So I would circle more road Hawks games for wins than home Hawks games. And like I said, I've downgraded that home ice advantage, which was one of the best in the league years ago. It's a 0 for me.
Maybe their trips to Arizona. Maybe when they go to Arizona, it might be a good spot to look at the Hawks. Vito, what do you think about the futures for the Hawks?
Well, that point total is very small. I mean, it's less than for the Ducks and for everyone else. I mean, the point total, if you want to bet it, I think you have to look in that over. 65 points. The team can get 66 points easy. Well, not easy, but they should be capable, I think, to get to 66. It's still Taves, it's still Kane. Let's not forget those guys are still elite, So at any given night they can give you 4 points, and all you need on the road is to score 3 goals. That's what I was taught in hockey. To win on the road you have to score at least 3 and allow less. And to win at home you have to score. You can't allow more than 2 goals to win at home, basically. So they can't score the goals. And so I think they're getting over that total. If Kane and Taves perhaps also wants to get good trades, to some decent clubs. So I think they also need to show the good performance. So I think they're gonna get over those points to make the playoffs. Not sure. Perhaps they're not making, but who knows how the season goes? You never know in NHL. But perhaps they're not making. But I would not touch that one. The rest of the bets for perhaps I would not touch, but the over point total, I think I would go with over there. Yeah.
The thing with Taves and Kane, it's important to point out, and Vito just mentioned it, these are prideful athletes. All right,
Absolutely.
These are prideful people. These are professionals. They're not going to dog it. They're not going to half-ass it. There are nights they play poorly, but it's not because of a lack of effort or they don't try or anything like that. It's not going to be because of that. So, to Vito's point with Taves and Kane, this is going to be a competitive hockey team on some nights throughout the early part of the season. That's why you circle these spots. Alex brought the point up too. Look more on the road than at home. A, the price is going to be even better on the road, and B, the home ice advantage is virtually nil because it's just such a disheveled and just they're numb right now, Blackhawks fans, with everything that's going on. So the road spots might be the ones to look for with Chicago this year.
Yeah, and you make a great point too. Like I said, with Kane and Taves, I mean, like I said, these are the pillars of the organization. Patrick Kane is the greatest Chicago Blackhawk of all time, bar none. So he's going to play his ass off every time he puts that sweater on, regardless of how the rest of the team does. We've seen it already in the struggling times of the last couple of years. So he's a guy you can count on to show up. Taves, and like I said, he's going to show up in the locker room. He's going to show up on the ice as much as he can, but he's just been physically hampered. So those are the things you look at for them. But the rest of this lineup, and that's the thing, will they be able to even catch some fire from those two guys? Just, I'm sure at some point the rah-rah speeches won't be able to carry them because they're just going to be that bad of a team. But early on, maybe they could play with a little bit of pride. Maybe that first game at home, maybe those certain spots, opening on the road, they got to sit and watch another banner ceremony. You think Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves won't be a little fired up potentially in that first game, saying, hey, this is a team that we used to dominate. Jonathan Taves, the first goal he had in his career was a highlight goal. And it was only shown on television in Colorado. It was a play where, if you see it and find it on YouTube, the Colorado announcers are going crazy as if they were Hawks announcers, the way that he scored that place. For his Hawks career to possibly end against that team that they used to dominate, and now they're on the flip side getting beat down by them. Maybe that carries them to a couple of spots. But as far as a full season goes, it's going to be rough. And honestly, it needs to be rough. Like I said, this is what's needed to try to build things back to a reasonable and respectable level.
And rebuilding in the broadcast booth too, as we know,
Yeah.
Pat Foley and Eddie Olczyk gone, out they go. Chris Foster's and Troy Murray in the TV.
I mean, I've never seen a franchise as a Chicago fan to just have everything change. You have your lineup, your coaching staff, your broadcast staff. I mean, everything is just the flip. The only thing that's staying the same, and I guess we'll have one new uniform, but the jersey is basically. So that's the only thing. The building and the jersey stay the same, but everything else is pretty much changing around.
All right. And that's basically a show. The last thing I guess I'll say, a little joke. I guess if the Blackhawks really want to go to the bottom, they should give Mike Yeo a call. Fire Richardson, give Yeo a call, put him as coach. He'll help the Hawks get that.
I take heart medication every day. I can't deal with that.
They call right? For a big contract in the goal.
Yeah,
I'm not sure he'd even want to see Mike Yeo as head coach of the Blackhawks, Alex, even if it guaranteed them Connor Bedard next year.
No, that would just you know what? And I would probably just go back to listening to the games on the radio like 20 years ago. At that point. I wouldn't want to physically watch that.
For sure. Well, that's the Blackhawk show. If you want to find Ian, Alex, or Vito, the links to their Twitters will be in the description below. Thanks for coming, guys. It was a really good show.
Yeah.
But yes, we'll be doing the Coyotes show in about 45 minutes. Not sure who will be on, but I guess we'll see at that time. Coyotes was actually more difficult than expected to find people to want to talk about the Coyotes, but I'm sure I'll be able to find somebody. But thanks, everybody, for watching, and have a good one, guys. Thanks.